No, I don't know why your folks moved to the coast during the
Because I
Depression.
was beginning to sound like a whopper a dago.
How come?
Moving from California back to Missouri.
Why?
She was in a class.
Well, so many.
Oh, you mean out there you were starting to sound like one. I want to know about moving out
He
there.
had to get me back to Missouri so that I wasn't going to sound like a whopper.
So you came back from there in what year?
1942.
And what year did you go out?
We went out in 1939.
And tell me about how we Oakies were known where you went to school, and how did people know they were Oakies?
You want me just to tell that part?
Yeah.
You don't want me to tell about going?
No. You had to think hard on that one, folks.
Well, no, I'm just thinking of where. Okay.
Go ahead. It's already on.
Oh, is it? When I hear people talking about the grapes of wrath and the Big Depression, I think about my family digging up their roots and going to Colorado first and then to California with nothing much that they owned when we went to California except the clothes on our backs and what we could get into a 1938 Chevy. And then I think about all this procession of people that came from Oklahoma. It wasn't just the Depression that drove people away, but it was the Dust Bowl years.
Yes.
People who were on farms, you couldn't raise anything. And it was a hard time. But when we got to California and finally Daddy found a job, I had friends that were from Oklahoma. And I quickly learned what discrimination was. I had never been around black people, and when you talk about discrimination, that's what most people think about. But in California at that time, it was Oakies. Now, if you said that you came from Oklahoma, then that's what you got called. You got called that in school. Kids would taunt Oklahoma kids after school on the sidewalks when they were playing. But I was from Missouri, so nobody ever said anything about me being one of those Oakies.
She didn't have any more.
My folks didn't have any more money or any more prestige than the people from Oklahoma. And at this time, the people that they were talking about actually had employment in California. We lived in a company village. And the people that lived in the village were all employed by the smeltering plant that my dad worked at on the bay.
So even though they worked in the same place...
They worked exactly in the same place.
So they weren't freeloaders?
They weren't freeloaders. They lived in company housing just like we did. And the company supervisor had a little nicer house, but it was at the end of the company village.
So did you pick up why people felt that way about Oakies?
I have no idea. I still have no idea, because...
Even after watching The Grapes of Wrath, you don't have any ideas?
Well, I can see why when they first arrived in these masses with trucks and no work and probably, I expect that they stole things. Living in the country when I was small down in Missouri, it was the gypsies that were transient, and when they came through to the El Dorado picnic, everybody watched because you knew they were going to be out stealing chickens or they were going to walk in and steal things. And I suspect that there were Oakies that did take advantage, well, not take advantage, but do what they had to do to get to survive. I don't know, and I don't know why. Because this would have been really several years later. I don't know why, except that their parents would have had to have passed it on.
Well, I was going to say, what's sad about it to me is I understand from The Grapes of Wrath and from other books I've read, I can understand that too many people responded to those ads that they talk about in Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, yes.
And, you can always find fruit to eat and so on,
oh, yes.
which would lead people to think you can go out and pick that fruit that's going to waste if it isn't picked. And then there were so many of them that there was no place for them, and they created camps that they called Hoovervilles. and they were just too trashy. They
Well-
didn't have
about-
porta potties.
Nope.
What about your oranges?
Well, and this was at a time when farm labor would have been very cheap in California, because the first school that I went to was in Oakland when Daddy finally found a job up in the Bay Area. And they would bring what we call the trash dumpsters, these big metal containers that had lids on them, full of grapefruit and oranges and so forth to the schools, and you could have all you wanted to eat. So and Daddy would go to the store, and you could buy one of the large grocery sacks full of oranges, beautiful oranges, for a quarter.
Well, I think from what you're saying, by the time you were there, the Oakies were suffering from what happened 3, 4, and 5 years before you got there.
That's true.
What about
and it's really
packing
sad.
peaches or something for an uncle when you were little?
Well, that was a different era.
Okay.
That was during my experience in fruit picking and packing came about during the war when I was a freshman.
I want to stay back here with the Oakies for a minute.
Okay.
So those people were employed the same.
Same company.
Were they able at this point to outfit their kids to where you couldn't really tell an Oakie from anybody else?
You could not tell a difference, and one of my best girlfriends, and I've learned later that was Donna, a family in Donna's family.
Your Donna and your family?
No, not my family. Spurlocks.
Oh.
This girl's name was Spurlock. And they did have several children. They had, I guess it must have been 5 children. And at that point, I would have been a 7th grader, I guess, 6th grader at that point.
Okay. I'm watching this time thing, and I don't want to run over like I did yesterday. So really what that amounted to then is that the prejudice was developed during that influx that Steinbeck wrote about.
Had to be.
And the influx was no longer being added to, particularly when you were there, but because of the reputation, the frictions, and some thievery and so on earlier, these people were looked on as trash, even though they were no longer.
I assume.
No, but they weren't being trashy at all when you were there.
They lived in a house that was identical to mine. When I say company houses, they were one block down the street.
And did teachers pick on them?
I don't believe so, because it was such a diverse community as far as school was concerned. We had some Japanese children. We had some Italian descent children.
So it was the kids themselves that picked on the kids.
It was the kids themselves that picked on other kids because they were Oakies.
And so they were bringing that from home, not based on what was actually.
It had to be.
Had to be. And folks, I'll drop it there, but I'm telling you, I sure feel lucky that my parents didn't go to California, but back home to Daddy.